using now. It's top.
The atmosphere in the service station was absolutely amazing. Even the toilet queue was a great social place at those days. You know, a good help some poor person who caught short and wanted to get to the toilet quickly, because there was kind of like 200 girls waiting in the loo queue to adjust their makeup and have a chat.
In the late 80s, the motorways enabled the explosion of a new subculture, rave. Young people met in makeshift venues and danced wildly to music, described by the government as wholly or predominantly characterized by the emission of a succession of repetitive beats.
1989 was a time of just fantastic parties. But without the M25, the southern parties couldn't really have happened, because a lot of them were called orbital parties because they were on the orbital road.
The rave parties were borderline legal gatherings of thousands of people determined to have a good time. The police were determined to stop them.
A police officer monitors pirate radio stations to get details of acid house parties being held this weekend.
To avoid detection, the party's secret location would only be revealed at the last minute on telephone lines. Would-be ravers gathered at service station payphones, ready to bomb down the motorway as soon as there was any news.
There would often be this crowd in the lobby, people queuing up to buy very cheap cups of hot chocolate, then going back to their cars, and every so often someone would come running out and shout a message across the car park, or would simply come running out, drive off.
And of course, as soon as a cluster of people got in cars, you'd just follow them. I think it was Heston Services. We all followed someone back to a nearby village, and she was actually going back to change her jumper.
The party organisers relied on the motorways to deliver them thousands of ravers before the police could arrive to stop the event happening.
And that was very much the cat and mouse game between the police and the party organisers. Because if you're a 20-strong police force and you're trying to get rid of, say, 5,000 kids who don't want to go, you're not going to be able to do it. You're just going to give up, do what you can about keeping the perimeter safe, and let the party carry on.
Go and have your party in the field.
And eventually what the police and the authorities decided to do was legalise all-night clubbing. It took us that long to decide that actually it was okay to enjoy yourself in Britain after midnight. So by then the motorways have become very much a part of people travelling for a night out. People travelling the sort of distances you were used to travelling in Spain or Italy or in America for a night out, but which we'd never done in Britain. In Britain, like before that, you were restricted to wherever the night bus went.
As motorways lengthened the distance you could comfortably travel, they had a profound effect on much of modern Britain. You no longer had to live in a city just because you worked in one.
I'm tired of these surroundings. We're cooped up in this London flat all the days of our lives.
Well then, let's go out into the country.
The English, historically, have never had a very strong attachment to the city or the town. They've always had a yen for getting out to the country. And once the motorways came, it was possible to go the whole hog and do what social surveys showed people really wanted to do, even in the suburbs, and that is get out altogether into the open countryside.
So the paradigm for a motorway journey, I think, is to start in a large city, to access the motorway, to come off the motorway onto an A road, and then onto a B road, and then onto an unlisted road, and finally onto a rutted track that leads us to an adorable bosky little cottage in a dell with roses round the door. And there is a sense of a yearning for bucolia, even in the heart of our motorway culture.
Kington Langley is a very pretty village indeed, a most attractive environment, and yet only a few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes I guess, along the way from excellent road communications via the M4 motorway.
Kington Langley was once a secluded village on the edge of the Cotswolds. That all changed when Junction 17 of the M4 opened, a mere 1.8 miles away.
Invariably, people are coming down the M4 motorway looking for a different pace of life, I guess, and a village like this will very definitely fit the bill. Equally, you're not cutting yourself off entirely in as much as the accessibility via the motorway makes employment to those areas that people have moved from still very, very feasible. So they certainly come to live the dream here without a shadow of a doubt. House prices here probably average out at around about 500,000 or 600,000. And the marketplace here is very, very healthy.
It's altered the whole nature of Kington Langley.
Working class people, they just cannot afford the prices of the bigger houses in the village.
They've definitely been outpriced because people living in the village now, they use the motorway mostly to work at Bristol, Bath, Swindon, and also commute to London. When we didn't have a motorway, we had a very, very close community. But since that has been for many years, I think it's altered, and it's not the same. It's not the same. Especially during the week, those going up to London, etc., well, they just eat, sleep, and they just can't come in with the village during the week.
But this is a self-sufficient, closely knit community. Apples are grown, eggs laid, bread made, honey collected, all with the belief that Worcester's farmers are second to none.
There's only one farm in the village now, and there's no work there. It's only just for 2 or 3 labourers.
But the commuter invasion wasn't all bad news for villages. Many of them had been struggling to survive since the late 19th century. Rural depression and the increasing mechanisation of farming had driven people away from the country and into the cities in search of work.
All the rural counties were losing people to the cities. And what was already happening even by the early 1960s, that these same farmhouses and little cottages that had been abandoned by the rural labouring poor were repopulated by the middle class seeking either second homes or homes from which they could commute by the motorway system.
As far as surviving without motorways, no. This village would be a dead village.
But motorways would also play a key role in sorting out the problem of the urban poor trapped in crowded cities. The post-war government had a plan for them. After all, a vision of the future with superhighways had no place for slum housing.
The motorway era promised this, drive out into Technicolor, this drive out into a world of that kind of wonderful 1950s glamour, but it was bright and colourful and cheerful, and that's what it promised.
Britain was to be rebuilt, a new Jerusalem constructed, or at the very least, a few new towns.
Continuing his tour of the new towns, the Prime Minister visited Stevenage and Harlow, in both of which the people live and work in the town.
The drudgery of commuting would be abolished. Millions could leave the slums to experience the delights of contemporary sculpture, amongst other things. And crucially, every new town would be on a motorway.
Motorways and new towns were part of the same planning concept. The motorways were needed to serve the new towns because they were seen as industrial centres. The motorways were therefore necessary to supply the factories where most of these workers were supposed to work. But importantly, these towns were to be seen as self-contained. People would live and work in them. They wouldn't need to commute, and that was a very important part of the thinking.
The good people of Milton Keynes, Cumbernauld and Stevenage were all meant to stay firmly put.
But of course, that didn't work. The moment you've got a road, people use it. And we know that in Britain, every time a new road's built, people flood onto it. When you build a motorway, it gets busy quickly, as if by a force of nature. So the new towns were always, in a way, undermined by their proximity to the motorway.
While many of the residents were happy to live in the new towns, many of them were happy to work elsewhere.
There is in planning a law of unintended consequences. Things never turn out as they were planned.
Today, the new town of Warrington in Cheshire has become commuter heaven. Situated on the intersection of 3 motorways, almost a third of Warrington's working population heads out every morning.
I live in Warrington and work in Manchester and use the M62 every morning to and from work.
If you asked me to go to some of the places around where I live, I probably wouldn't be able to do it, but ask me to take you to Oxford and you'd be fine.
Warrington's ideal, it's right in the middle of the motorway network. We've got the M62,
the M56,
the M6 to the east,
which is one of the routes that I take on a regular basis.
So we can be in London within sort of 3 hours.
Brighton, which can be up to 6 hours journey.
We can get up to Glasgow within about 3 to 3.5 hours. We go up there quite regularly.
I do quite enjoy the commute. I like the time on my own.
But I'm really starting to develop a bit of a weakness for teenage dance music at the moment.
I don't like other people using my car that much. It's very much a space for me to have my bits and bobs. I'll buy chocolate and hide it in the glove compartment until my daughter gets in and tries to find it.
I love Italy, I love Italian food, I love Italian cars, so I thought the next thing is going to be I'll have to learn Italian. And it's quite amusing when I'm driving along in the car, particularly on a long journey, and there's people sat next to me and I'm giving it this, I'm gesticulating as I'm driving along, and people think you're completely insane, but who cares, it's my space, it's my car.
Viaggio molto. Domani e martedì lavoro a Firenze.
I started trying to write stories in my head. I actually started it when I was having a really bad day, or I'd had a bad day, and was travelling up the motorway, and I just thought, I don't want to go home, I just want to keep going. And then it started to get me thinking, where would I go, what would happen? And I started writing this story in my head about a fictional character that just continues on the motorway.
In my reverie, I saw the M40 as it will be some 20,000 years from now, when the second Neolithic age has dawned over Europe. Still no services. All 6 carriageways and the hard shoulder are grassed over. Every single one of the distance markers, Birmingham 86, has been crudely tipped to the horizontal, forming a series of steel biers. On top of them are the decomposing corpses of motorway chieftains, laid out for excarnation prior to interment. You know, what the story proposes in a way is that motorways may be our civilization's greatest earthworks, you know, that they may be what's left behind, what's most visible of our culture when it has declined. It seems to me that our entire culture, if you like, is frozen, driving on the motorway of history, believing fervently in its own destination at some kind of cosmic and spiritual service centre where the meals will turn out to be fantastic and the travel lodge will have great beds. But the reality is, of course, that like any other civilization, we're almost certainly doomed to some form of extinction. The business parks and their relationship to the motorways is where ideals of futurity of the late 20th century have finally crashed.
Since the 1970s and 80s, motorway junctions have been colonised by business parks. The post-war search for the perfect living environment has now become a search for the ideal work environment.
The 180 acres of supreme opportunity. It's highly accessible by the motorway network, so please come to Green Park. The vision is simply to give people a stunning place to work where people will be inspired by the architecture around them and the environment outside the buildings as well as inside. Bottom line is about maximising productivity, but there's an awful lot of research that shows that productivity in corporates is maximised through people being happy where they work, and we're trying to play our part in delivering that kind of development.
Just meters from the M4, Green Park is set to provide a working environment for 10,000 people. As was once the vision for the new towns, the dream is for this to be a place you never have to leave.
It is ultimately our aim to absolutely deliver a state-of-the-art sustainable community here. We're currently just about to submit plans for a community of just over 700 homes. So what we've tried to do is bring on board all the other facilities that we would normally find in a town centre. So it's about creating choices, but it's always a challenge to influence people's behaviour through planning.
These fantasies of futuristic motorway communities are the product of business rather than state planning. In fact, business has always gone hand in hand with motorways. These roads weren't built for leisure, but to serve manufacturing.
Somewhere across the Pennine Way, a truck is moving on. True love waits at the Rose Cafe. The night has nearly gone.
In Britain, the purpose of the motorways was to move traffic quickly, to create great trunk routes for the movements of goods, primarily between major cities. The distribution of goods is key to the motorway network. They were economic drivers, great engines for the British economy. And today you see that. They are the home of the gigantic lorry, the great truck that carries goods around.
Thank you very much.
All right, mate. How are you getting on then? You've been stuck in a bit of traffic?
I'm stuck in the traffic on the M1 at the moment. So if you can advise the customer.
Cool. Keep me informed due to the coke load as well on the back here, yeah?
Will do. If I get any other delays, I'll give you a ring.
No worries, mate. I'll speak to you later.
Aye, see you, Gaz.
Cheers, buddy.
Ta-ra. Everything you see round about you and everything you buy in the supermarkets is brought to you on a lorry. They are the lifeline of Britain. I don't think people do realise how important the lorries are. If all the lorries stopped in the yard for a week, Britain would come to a standstill.
Because there is now so little stock in the system, because products are moved long distances by road, without road transport, the shelves run bare, the health service is severely disrupted, manufacturing grinds to a halt. Within a few days, half the cars in the country are off the road because they can't get fuel. So altogether, life comes to an end within 3 or 4 days.
Best part of my working day is spent up and down the motorways all over the UK. The cab is your home for the week, and it's we're spending so much time away from home, Monday to Friday. Being a tramper means that you're spending all your life on the road. Leave home on the Monday morning, 2 o'clock, you could head up to Scotland, and then reload Scotland back down to Cornwall, Cornwall across to Kent, Kent back up to Scotland, Scotland back down to your base. This is my Three Pedals hotel.
A quarter of the trucks you pass on the road are carrying food and drink. The supermarket has grown in tandem with the motorway network. Now, £1 in every 3 spent on consumer goods in the UK goes into their tills.
In the 60s, what we would now see as almost no choice at all would have seemed like an awful lot of choice. The rate of expansion has just gone on and on, mushrooming, for want of a better metaphor, and we don't know now where it will end.
The typical superstore will now carry 20 to 25,000 product lines. This would not be possible without the motorways constantly providing fast and reliable deliveries from the distribution centres alongside them.
If you drive up British motorways today, you'll find at virtually every intersection these strange worlds. These are the worlds of the distribution of goods, the world of gigantic warehouses, the world of enormous great lorries.
Magna Park is the biggest in the UK, sited in a golden motorway triangle of the M1, M6 and M69. It was developed in the late 80s by a venture partnership between Asda and the Church of England's pension fund.
By investing quite heavily in distribution centres, the large retail chains have been able to shift the stock from the shop into the warehouse, thereby releasing space in the shop for sales purposes. It's also allowed the retailers to extend the range of products that they hold. It's allowed them to channel the product through the system so much more rapidly, allowing them to sell the goods to the public and get the public's cash before they have to pay their suppliers. So there are a whole series of benefits really that have accrued from centralising in distribution centres rather than having the suppliers deliver direct to the shop.
But there are pros and cons. The average distance food travels in the UK has more than doubled since 1962. This rise isn't just down to the HGV. We're also travelling more to shop ourselves. And the ultimate shopping experience, of course, is right next to a motorway.
After driving all them miles all week, I do tend to drive another 150 miles on a Saturday to treat the wife to her shopping day out. We travel mainly all over the country, could go anywhere to the main shopping centres. Trafford Park in Manchester, Lakeside, down near London, Blue Water, Cribbs Causeway. It's something that my wife gets a lot of enjoyment out of, shopping, and I find it quite relaxing. Plonk myself down outside Next with my magazine and leave her to shop happily.
All roads lead today to Blue Water. Blue Water is the biggest shopping mall in Britain at the moment, and of course in a few years it'll probably be one of the smallest. Britain is a nation not of shopkeepers as such, but of shoppers. I mean, it's become a national disease, and I'm sure that many people in Britain love shopping and they live to shop, but what's it done to the country? Physically, certainly in terms of its architecture and its planning, it's littered the landscape with enormous great gas-guzzling air-conditioned stores, American-style or Chinese-style warehouses, which are just, they suck up masses of energy, they blast out lots of heat, they're destroying the planet as much as the cars that use them.
Blue Water has 27 million visitors a year. The product of a survey of over 20,000 people's shopping fantasies, it is designed to exacting consumer requirements, and it aims to fulfill all of them.
I come to Blue Water at least twice a week, probably 3 times, but at least twice. And if I'm here on my own, I'm here for shopping, generally speaking, or for a beauty treatment. I come with my other half at least once a week, and generally we come here to eat. We've also been learning Spanish here at the Learning Centre, And then I would be here for the cinema, come with a friend to the cinema, or for lunch, or just to meet someone for coffee. And it's a relaxing place, an enjoyable place to be. I wouldn't come here as often without motorways, because the local roads are very narrow and very twisty. And if the volume of people that use Bluewater were having to use the local roads, it would be impossible.
Bluewater is straddled by two main motorways, the M20 and the M25. So for Bluewater's success, they're absolutely critical. And if they do stop running, then obviously we notice a downturn in feet. We have people who will do a 2-hour drive to get here, who then may stay for 12 hours. They'll maybe have a massage in the spa, they'll have an evening meal, and then they might take in a film at the cinema. So the motorways are critical for us. The catchment size is currently about 10.5 million people.
It's a much pleasanter place to shop than a town centre. It's definitely better. You're indoors, you can park under cover. When you leave your house, you don't actually have to step out into the elements. And while you're here shopping, I feel safer. There are security people walking around. The stores all have security systems in place and CCTV.
We have our own on-site police station, which is fully manned at all times. We have a full team of chaplains who are there very much to give pastoral care and help.
I have withdrawal symptoms if I don't come shopping here at least once a week. Over the Christmas period, when it's so busy and we don't tend to come as often, I'm very, very, very keen to get back again. I think I could be addicted to a lot worse things than Bluewater.
Bluewater is also part of the national curriculum for geography, so you regularly see very big groups of school children being taken around the centre and looking at everything from the architecture through to the individual stores.
I think that the out-of-town shopping malls are a kind of logical conclusion of the way that the motorway system is developed here. The aspirational quality of the British motorways was built on a consumer vision of a future that was powered by consumption. The out-of-town shopping malls have arisen to gratify that as an outgrowth of the roadway, and in all conscience, that's where we should go.
Our lives are now spent much more on the tarmac than they were 30 or 40 years ago. In a sense, the motorways form a kind of sticky network of connections linking those separate parts of our lives.
Living without the motorways would be an absolute nightmare.
Can you imagine all the traffic trying to get through London that comes around this M25?
I certainly couldn't live without the motorways. I certainly couldn't work without the motorways. I might be able to live, but it'd be living like a hermit.
Give me the motorways any day.
Yeah, I agree there.
I suppose it's a form of democracy gone crazy. I mean, when democracy seizes up, when you've got too many people trying to do the same thing and to be democratic, as it were, everyone wants to be democratic, everyone wants equal rights on the road, and you end up, of course, with 28 million cars, which you have today, all squashed up together. In 1959, when the M1 opened, there were 2.8 million cars, so things have changed a little bit.
Next time, we look at how we fell out of love with the motorway, charting the rise of the road protest movement and the passions that were aroused.